Thanks everybody for being here. We really appreciate it. We know everybody's busy. Welcome back to the Progress Texas Happy Hour. I'm Executive Director Kathleen Thompson. Progress Texas amplifies progressive values, leaders, and actions. Our digital, podcast, and radio networks reach millions with smart, hard-hitting coverage. As the #1 progressive pod in Texas and in the top 2% of all podcast listeners globally, we make Texas politics easy to understand and participate in during this crucial midterm year. You can support the real free press for the price of a Whataburger combo meal, so please become a sustaining donor today. Can we use tech to save democracy, and how does big tech fit in? It's a fact that American elections are facing targeted challenges, hacked and corroded by billionaire buyouts of media and AI disinformation campaigns online, but that's where many people form their opinions and their ballot decisions. That's compounded by concentrated voter suppression and racial redistricting right here in Texas and beyond. Our state is a testing ground, second only to Florida, for data centers built haphazardly and without consideration or recourse for impacted communities. This has created a top issue for midterm voters, crossing partisan lines, with 7 in 10 Americans opposing construction of data centers in their area. And to top it all off, the world's first trillionaire made by tech, Elon Musk, is trying to sway our elections again after spending $260 million to get Trump elected in 24. Did you all hear that sigh in the room? Because I just did. With major investments in the Republican Party this midterm cycle. According to Data for Progress, cryptocurrency, AI, big tech, and online betting corporations have collectively spent nearly $300 million in political races this cycle. It's really an understatement to say that tech is at the center for democracy in American elections today. With fewer than 90 days until this monumental midterm, we're asking our panel today how they're preparing for November and beyond. Today, for this live conversation during the DNC's final meeting before the midterms, we have co-founder and CEO of Civitech, Jeremy Smith, on the mic to talk about how we can use tech for good to power progress. And he's joined by 2 state party chairs, Christale Spain from South Carolina and Texas's very own Kendall Scudder. Together, we're going to talk about how technology, organizing, and state party leadership can expand voter participation, strengthen civic engagement, and build the electorate for 2026 and beyond. Jeremy Smith is co-founder and CEO of Civitech, a Texas-based B Corp that builds data tools for civic orgs and governments. Prior to founding Civitech, he launched the nonprofit Register to Vote, which created new strategies for voter registration methods that help to identify and support more than 400,000 new voters. That's awesome. Jeremy has taught dozens of candidates how to run for office and has pioneered numerous efforts to improve the public availability of election-related information. Welcome back to the podcast Happy Hour, Jeremy.
Thank you for having me.
Chair Christale Spain made history as the first Black woman to serve as chair of the South Carolina Democratic Party. A proud South Carolina native, Christale's journey into politics didn't begin in Washington, but at the grassroots as a volunteer. She turned her lived experience into leadership. She worked her way from volunteer to the executive director of the state party, serving under 3 chairs, and founded the South Carolina Democratic Black Women's Caucus to ensure that Black women's voices were front and center of the party, where they should be. Thanks for joining us for your first time, Christale.
Thank you so much for having me.
And often seen touting our Progress Texas hat, as he is today, available only at our live events, a frequent guest on our pod network, Texas Democratic Party, Kendall Scudder. At 36, Kendall is one of the youngest people leading a major political party in America. His mission is simple: make Texas work for working Texans. Welcome back to the pod, Kendall.
Thanks so much for having me.
Kendall, let's get this pod started. We're going to direct the first question to you. Let's discuss where we're recording from, streets away from the state capitol and one of the most vital states in this midterm election. The DNC selected Austin as its last meeting place before the elections. Texas's high-profile Senate race is bringing waves of attention that could bring a blue wave for this massive, diverse state. Talk to us about the significance of Texas's turnout for progress this November and why voters outside of Texas should care.
Well, here's a truth, Kathleen. The truth is Texas did not turn red overnight. And it's not going to turn blue overnight either. And so I want everybody to kind of check that. This is going to be cycle over cycle, building the infrastructure so that when we start winning races, which I think we have huge opportunities this year, we can continue to build on that because, frankly, we're not going to win every race this year, okay? So what I think is really important, and this could just be the farm kid in me, is that you're keeping your head down. We're working every single day like we're 2 points down.
Right.
Shoveling every person we can to the polls because the people that we are advocating for are counting on us. They're counting on us to meet a moment. And so it's, you know, I understand that it's the sexy thing to do would be to get up and tell everybody about how we're going to just kill it and knock it out and win everything. I do think that we have a lot of opportunities up and down the ballot. But the humility and the hard work, I think, is what is going to build us long-term opportunities. So when that Capitol they meet in that Capitol building in January, it's on us not just to make sure we have a Democratic senator, but we also need to make sure we either have the governor's mansion, the lieutenant governor's office, or both. Because when they overturned the Voting Rights Act, we have 22 VRA districts in Texas.
Right.
They are going to carve up that Capitol building to be wider than it was pre-Reconstruction, denying representation to millions of people across this state. And so you can't buy your way out of the problem we're in. It's all of us rolling up our sleeves, making the calls, doing the voter contact that is necessary for us to be able to do it. And also, what you're going to see from the state party over the next couple months is continuing to build a robust voter protection program. We already are at a point where we are going to have more staff on the voter protection team than we have ever had, because if we don't blow this election out of the water and it's close, we are going to be litigating and fighting this election because, as we know, when Republicans can't win on their own merits, they try to steal them. And so that is our priority, working hard every day, winning everywhere we can, and fighting to protect access to ballots.
Thanks, Kendall. Speaking of voters for this election, let's talk about the main way that voters are viewed by campaigns, researchers, pollsters, and in the news. They're often reduced down to their data. In Texas, the Democratic Party and several other groups have launched a historic Texas Together campaign, a coordinated campaign that includes the sharing of one voter file. Our data is everything. Jeremy, at its core, our digital identity is a reflection of our ideals. So how can data be used to increase voter motivation and participation?
That's a very simple question. So the easy answer, I know I kid. You've hit on something I think that's very important, which is that data is fundamentally, it's a very broad term, and it's a description of who we are as people. And you can choose to use that in an exploitative fashion. In your intro, you kind of highlighted the way that many of our big tech companies do that right now. Mm-hmm. But it is also, it's a form of note-taking. Libraries are full of data. Books are full of data. All of us here grew up in schools doing data work, writing things down, taking notes. And computers allow us to expand the speed with which we can do that. And so data is something that we have been able to historically gain significant advantages on, in terms of it's a form of tracking and holding ourselves accountable back to our communities to say, I have spoken with Kendall and this is what Kendall thinks is important. And so now I can follow back up with Kendall and let him know, here is this event that we are doing that it alights on your interests, and we would love to have your support. And that is the best form of using tools to help us follow back up with people and to build real relationships. And what TDP and South Carolina and others have really done is to innovate constantly on this. So South Carolina in particular is the core of all of the best practice sharing of all of the state parties, because they lead and host the Association of State Democratic Chairs. And that means that they are constantly sharing what is working, both in terms of data and technology, but in every other form of organizing practice, and making sure that that is spilling out everywhere that we need it right now. Including most recently rushing off to Maine to help them quickly do a brand new caucus in order to make sure that we had a Senate candidate. And that's something that's been able to champion. And Texas in particular has innovated so many new systems in just the past few years. They were the first to hire a CTO a few years back. And the tools that we have built actually started here in Texas. When Kendall was working with us back in 2018, we invented new methods of helping people register to vote so that they can cast their ballot. And South Carolina has the distinction of being the very first state outside of Texas to do that with us. So it's a fun
I didn't
full
know
circle
that.
for us.
Very good.
Honestly, I'm just trying to be Chair Spain when I grow up.
I'm trying to be Chair Spain when I grow up.
Very good, very good. Next up, Christale, on the note of voter participation, we're recording this live podcast just days after 6 state primaries showed excitement for progressive nominees in Michigan, Minnesota, moderate Dem wins in Wisconsin, some unease for Trump-endorsed candidates. You may have missed it, listeners, but in all the current national primary coverage, but the DNC is voting tomorrow to move South Carolina to the beginning of the presidential primary cycle election calendar. This is a competitive, very competitive process, so congratulations, Christale.
Thank you.
What does this move signal about the party's commitment to the South, to Black and rural voters?
I mean, I think it signals that the party is committed to doing what it takes to start winning again in the South, in the deep South, right? Which is different from, I think, a lot of the rest of the country. And I've been saying since I've been chair, if Democrats want to start winning, want to start taking back power, we got to win it in the deep South. Like that just has to happen. And as the chair already said, we didn't start losing overnight. Like this has been a very slow, long, exhausting bleed. And finally, I believe that the DNC is showing that they're ready to stop the bleeding. They're ready to put their money where their mouth is and show Democrats, show the country that we're not giving up on the South. You know, the South will rise again, but not in the way that it rose the first time.
Right.
It's going to be a different
New South is what I hear.
A new South, however you want to call it. We're calling it Flip the Future in South Carolina.
Right.
But we fielded candidates all across the ballot this year for the first time ever. We've got 124 legislative seats, and we have a Democrat running in all those seats. So there is no Republican running unchecked. You know, are we going to win all of them? Of course we're not. But we are going to break the Republican supermajority. We can do that. And we can elect Democrats statewide. But it takes that work, it takes that grinding work that never stops, no matter who the chair is. We have to keep working, we have to keep organizing, and we have to keep making sure, beefing up our data, like getting all of our county parties back online to stop doing what they're doing and to start like utilizing all the good information that we pay for to engage voters.
I'm glad to hear that about that county party engagement. We have some folks in the audience who know how hard that work is, that
Very
day in
hard.
and day out. Jeremy, back to you. Let's talk about these primaries. Any reflections from you and from Civitech on the primaries? And what do you say to voters who are concerned about the influence that they've seen from big tech on these elections?
So with these primaries, I think we see a lot of punditry, and I'm sure y'all are getting the same kind of calls that we do. Lots of people are bringing up like what's on their mind is something like just DSA commentary or something else, and we constantly are just trying to point out that number one, if you're concerned about this, these races are close and they're tiny margins, and it says that like there's not some big thing you need to reinterpret the whole country on. And also these are local races, and these candidates are working through those primaries, and they're all immediately unifying behind each other the moment that they're over. And the last thing is that there are way more of like the intrigue that the national media audience is putting into like 3 to 4 races across the country versus, you just mentioned Tuesday, there were more than 4,000 elections that took place on just this Tuesday. There are 129,000 elections this year. So the thing that we take away and we focus on is that across those hundreds of thousands of elections last year and this year, Democrats are winning at the largest margins that we have on record because of the work that is being put in. And for example, having someone running in every race, this blue wave is going to be bigger than I think anyone realizes. And having a candidate in there in the first place is a necessary step to winning. So we're going to win races that people are totally unclear on. And the last thing I'll say on the primaries is we're seeing an enormous differential in the amount of Democrats turning out versus Republicans. They are not enthusiastic about their candidates, and our people are, and they are showing up and voting. And so all of the nonsense that we see in kind of national op-eds does not match the reality, which is enthusiasm, participation, more people running for office, more people showing up and voting, more like involvement at the county chair and state party level. So we're excited about what we see, and we think we need to continue that momentum in the primaries. On the big tech front of it, I think this is we're at a vital inflection point in which we are dealing with new industries that the entire economic model depends on displacing tens of millions of people's jobs. That is the only way that these people make a return on their investment. And in that moment, others only want to talk about a hypothetical person's genitals in a sport somewhere that they don't play.
Right.
And we spend so much time responding to this false frame and when there's actually like important things going on, like people losing their health care, millions of people around the world being denied basic medical care because the United States decided to turn it off. Millions of our neighbors being illegally kidnapped and sent to foreign gulags. The inability of like national commentary writers to see these basic things and to talk about them with the gravitas and the prioritization that they should is incredibly frustrating. And the people who are doing the work are those right here who are sitting here and getting people elected to change that now and to stop the bleeding. And so I think on the big tech side of it, people are making a bet on corruption. This is a moment in an era of corruption in America in which you can grift and bribe your way into massive government contracts. You can steal all of that money for yourself. And hopefully that is a very temporary thing for which people will face restitution. But too many groups and people and institutions have made a choice, which is to throw in on that temporary moment for celebrity or for money. And we have got to find a way to reset that balance because it is deeply unhealthy and it is just harming so many of our communities in the meantime.
Jeremy, this question is also for you. You've heard from party leaders all year long about Republican-led attempts to disenfranchise and to suppress voters. What is Civitech doing to combat these efforts and with what kind of tools?
So we run a large group who partners with many others on the ground who have more local expertise. And what we try to do is we think about scale. How do we get information to these party chairs and to these candidates to know here are the people who are being deleted from the voter file illegitimately in places like Mississippi. Here are people whose ballots are not being counted even though they was sent in. Here are people whose ballots are being delayed by these new rules at the post office that the president is implementing. And so what we do is we gather data, but with a lot of technical skill, but it's a human component. And that's something that we got from our organizing DNA. We have hundreds of contractors and dozens of staff who engage in hundreds of thousands of FOIAs and open records requests. And we walk into offices and we call people and we send a check for $9.13 to Deborah in the county clerk's office so we can get a CD-ROM sent to us. We process that CD-ROM, right? And we put these things in to find people who are being left out. And that's what you can use. You can combine all of our organizing and our people power with some technical sophistication to essentially quickly get information to say, you are having your rights taken away by being deleted illegitimately from the voter file. And so we build tools to combat bad laws. The VDR law in Texas is a bad law from a Jim Crow era. It is meant to deny the freedom riders coming to Texas to help people register to vote. So we invented ways to make it easier for people to register to vote in places like that. And so we focus on finding records of people who are left out and then making those accessible and inventing ways to contact them to help them through those steps. And so we work very closely on voter registration, vote by mail, ballot chase, and ballot curing. All of the mechanical, we think about politics in mechanical terms. Like, how does Kathleen show up and get her vote cast? There's steps, right? There's paperwork you got to fill out. There's an ID that you have to take with you. There's a specific location you must go to. And there's a ballot that's going to have a whole bunch of options that you may not know about in advance. So we break each of those down into their core components. And we think about, how do we make this more accessible? How do we make this available to more people in our country? And that's what our entire team is essentially invested in doing. But we do that in partnership with literally thousands of clients and campaigns, and tens of thousands of other organizations behind that, and then tens of millions of people who actually show up and do all of that work. And so it's just always an amazing thing to remember that it's community that makes tech and other things possible, not the other way around.
Yeah. For our state party leaders, we've discussed coordinated efforts from Republicans and billionaire and tech oligarchs to buy and to suppress our votes. What do you see as the biggest barriers to voter turnout this election cycle, and how are Black and brown voters impacted, noting, of course, racial redistricting here in Texas and the Calais decision? And what are your state party orgs doing to combat that? Christale, you want to go first?
I think one of the biggest barriers to voting this year is just the tactics used by Republicans to suppress the votes. Especially in South Carolina, they will change polling locations. There won't be enough voting machines. They want to make
Happening
sure.
right now in Tarrant County.
Yeah, making sure that folks get disgusted and leave. So what we're doing is trying to make sure that we stay ahead of them if we can. Right, making sure that folks know where their polling location is or where it was last time, and making sure they understand that this could change, right? So that we have some kind of rapid response, that we can get the information out to them, and just constantly encouraging them to stay in line, to having those comfort captains, those people out there at the polls, physically there, just to kind of say, hey, don't get out of line, don't get out of line, like that. And that's like more of that grinding work, right? That's the community that Jeremy was talking about, right? Just having folks there to encourage folks not to get out of line. But
Is that something new that you're doing this year? Is that
no,
something
we've been doing it for a
before?
couple of years.
I've never heard of comfort captains.
Yeah,
That
just
sounds
there.
great.
Don't get out of line.
Okay.
You're not alone. So those are some of the things that we're doing right now with our voter protection work, and just having lawyers on deck just to be ready to make sure that folks know what the laws are, what their rights are with voting. Like in South Carolina, the law is that you're registered to vote until you die. So they've created this system where they're just moving people to inactive, right? Like you're no longer an active voter, but the way you become an active voter is to go vote, right? So we use our county parties to call through those inactive voter lists in their county, call through the Democrats in their county, likely
Yes.
Democrats,
Yes.
to let them know that you've been moved to inactive, but this is how you get moved back to active. So we've just been trying to educate folks, inform folks, figuring out how we have a rapid response, having those comfort captains, and just being prepared for a very long election day.
Comfort captains is a fun idea.
Yes, it
I hadn't
is.
thought of that. So for us, I mean, Texas is the hardest state to register to vote in. And so I think between now and the voter reg deadline, we're all in on the voter reg front. But what we're also fighting right now are efforts. Tis the season to start shutting down polling locations. Mm-hmm. And so we saw that in Tarrant County, where they tried to shut down half their polling locations, 140 some odd of them. And, I will just always tell folks, you may not always see the state party operating in some of this. And Chairwoman Spain will tell you this. We have different roles legally. Also, like if somebody has to get litigious and start filing lawsuits and stuff, usually we're the ones kind of scraping to do it. So, you may not see us there all the time, but trust that myself and our county chairs in those places are regularly meeting and discussing and talking with our attorneys about what our paths forward are on situations like that. And we just have to make decisions on the best legal paths. And if you're in a situation like you are in Texas, we don't have levers of control. And so you've got to figure out how to work within systems that have been designed to obstruct access to ballots. And so preserving voting locations, which requires, I think, huge public pressure to have success, because we've taken away, especially with the VRA being overthrown the way it has, you're taking away a lot of legal levers to be able to keep those polling locations open. And it takes public pressure to kind of lean on folks, and we're seeing that working places. And that's just like, okay, I'm going to sound like a radical here. I know Texans are used to it, but become ungovernable. Okay. The truth is, when they're trying to shut down your polling locations, your neighborhood place where you know that people have been voting for years and years and disrupting their voting patterns, you need to show up and give them hell. I'm not saying to hurt someone. I am not saying to behave in fashions that are illegal, but I am saying civil disobedience goes a very long way.
Right.
And when we do it in unison together, it creates huge waves. So that, I think, is a huge piece. The next, I spoke about it earlier, I think it's worth talking about again. 844-TX-VOTES is our voter protection hotline for anyone who is having problems casting ballots or getting access to ballots. We are directing our entire party services staff into voter protection for this election cycle. That has never happened, but we see that it is a particular challenge this year. And so we are training all members of our staff to fold in on a Vote Pro program where it is an organizing effort. So you will see over the next few months the Texas Democratic Party recruiting volunteers, not just for a coordinated campaign, but for voter protection program. And that takes specialized training. If you're doing it wrong, they're going to try to say your stuff in ballot, you know how they act. So it takes particular training skill sets to do it. And so you are going to see folks across the state, county chairs, all of us folding together to recruit into a voter protection effort. Our fight does not stop on election day. In a lot of ways, that's where ours kind of starts. If you have close elections, if you look at places like North Carolina, it took them almost 9 months to solve for their election in November, to seat their judge because Republicans were fighting. And we are fully anticipating that Republicans in Texas will do that. They will not go quietly into this good night. They will temper tantrum and kick and scream and whine and complain and do anything they can to not come to terms with the fact that they just have real bad fucking ideas that nobody wants to sign on to, okay? And so the voter protection work is leading up to the election and those things, but then beyond. And you will hear us begging for money, as you always hear the party doing. And understand, it is hard for us to raise that money, but the dollars we're able to raise when you hear us screaming voter protection post-election, it's what's going to allow us to do the legal fights necessary to ensure that the ballots you cast were counted appropriately.
Very good. As we begin to close out our conversation, again, we're one street away from the last DNC meeting to organize before the midterms. What are each of your organizations doing with the runway left? How does tech fit into it? And what's your vision for post-November?
I'd love to start on that. So the Texas Together coordinated campaign, look, y'all, I'm not telling you it's perfect. This is the first time we've done a big coordinated campaign in Texas. We're all on a team together. If there's issues, take notes. We'll address it after the election. If it's urgent, we'll talk about it now. But we're learning and we're building and growing as a state. But our coordinated campaign right now is just factually the largest one that the state's ever seen. We've already made more than 11 million phone calls in that coordinated campaign. We have already knocked on more than 1 million doors within that coordinated campaign, and we're just getting started. What does that mean? Well, what it means is not only are we making the voter contact, but we're finally, for the first time, fixing this voter file that has not been worked in the state. Remember when Beto was operating, they weren't working within that voter system. And that's not a knock on him. That's just saying that was just the fact there. And so we've now cleaned more than 1.5 million bad phone numbers out of our voter file in communities that have not been able to work. And we still have, probably 10 million more to go. And then we're going to cycle through those numbers again. We've been doing this canvassing work and building in unison with all of our candidates for the first time since 1982. Our whole ticket is going to be folded in on our coordinated campaign, which means that we are going to have data to build on in future coordinateds. And we're working with our county parties on the ground to try to make sure we're coordinating all the way down to a precinct chair level. So your answer to your tech question is any precinct chair in Texas should have access to the Texas Together portal, where you can put together Texas Together walks in your neighborhood. They will fold into our large Texas Together lists. Well, we will work to recruit volunteers to come into that. Sometimes it'll be successful, sometimes it won't. But our effort is to try to make sure that all the way down to the precinct level, we are singing from the same hymnal in an effort to try to understand that it's not about fiefdoms. Who gives a shit who's in charge? At this point, they're just the king of the loser pile. When we start winning elections, we'll fight about who's in charge. I don't care who gets credit. I don't care. Right now, it is all hands on deck, using every tool we can to be on a team together and carry this across the finish line for the people who are counting on us.
Same thing in South Carolina. Our coordinated, we run coordinateds all the time, but this year is a little bit different because we don't have a super wealthy candidate, and so this time everybody's got to be bought in, financially bought in, and that's new for us. So of course there's a lot of hurt feelings around that, but we're pushing through that to make sure people understand the importance of shared resources, right? We can do more with less if everybody puts their money into this one pot. So we've got our coordinator running. Last year we launched our year-round organizing program, the Democracy Builders, and we've got about 1,500 people across the state who are part of that program, and their goal was to talk to their neighbors who are inactive voters. not inactive, excuse me, infrequent voters. And so those folks have knocked their doors, they've made phone calls, they send them a postcard. People love sending postcards. They send them the postcard. And so they're still doing that. And so we're folding those folks into our voter protection program. So we will have about 1,500 people who are the army of the willing to be comfort captains, to be poll watchers, to be those folks. And so just folding them into our on-the-ground organizing program that is focused on door knocks, phone calls. We hadn't gotten to 1 million yet, but pray to God we get there. We only need 1.1 million votes to change things in South Carolina. So if we get there, we're good. But same thing, we're just working hard. We're doing the grinding work that is not glamorous. It could be fun, but we're just doing it every day.
At Civitech, we are currently in the midst of we're the largest voter registrar in the country at this point. And so we're focused on 10.4 million people they're not on the voter file. They've been left out of many parts of society. We identify them through public records collection, and we work across all 50 states. So we have 10.4 million that we are doing in the next 6 weeks as we hit these deadlines. And so we are laser focused on how do we get more people into the voter file so that all of these contact efforts that you're hearing about can reach more people. We want those phone numbers and those names so that South Carolina and Texas and every other party have more votes to go get, and we want to help turn them out. And then the second thing that we are really focused on is we currently have hundreds of candidates running locally on down ballot races on our tool Running Mate, which is entirely free for people to get started, and it's extremely cheap and affordable for down ballot races who don't have other options, and the data flows right back into these state parties to inform their operations. So we have many, many hundreds of those who are currently running, and there's nearly 50,000 elections across the country, and we want to make sure that we're winning not just the House and the Senate back, but the state legislatures and the county races and the school boards. And so we're trying to build power at all levels and really build the bench for the future. All these great candidates that have come out and they've bravely stepped forward this year, and we want to make sure that we're getting as many of them across the line as we can, because those are our future state legislators and members of Congress and senators in the decades to come.
Very good. Thank you to our terrific panel. Can we give it up for Jeremy, Christale, and Kendall?
Before we wrap, I know you're trying to wrap, Kathleen, but I'm ungovernable, okay?
What's up, Kendall? Go ahead.
I just want to say, we're sitting in Austin right now. Chair Spain is here. And as state chair in Texas, I just want to, as publicly as I can, thank you so much for all that you do. Thank you for coming to Texas. And I have to tell you, one of my favorite colleagues, as we have them across this, there's 57 state chairs. I always know if I need help, and I call Chairwoman Spain, she'll answer the phone. And let me tell you, over the last 15 months, I've needed a lot of help, okay? and she has just been such a great mentor to anyone who needs help. And those of us that represent southern states, we stick together as we kind of battle this together. And so as we're just wrapping up, I just want to give an extra special shout out and thank you to Chairwoman Spain for coming here and always being such a team player.
Thanks for that, Kendall. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Lovely. Best wishes to the three of you and our audience for the remainder of your DNC weekend. Our live podcast recording today was made possible by Civitech. Thank you, Jeremy. The Honorable Yasmin Simon, Charles Zeller, John Cotter, Valerie DeBill, Dona Tabrizi, Jill Van Voorhis, the Honorable Zoe Qadri, David Weinberg, the Honorable Stephen Adler in his new book, Hot Seat, Hot City, out August 25th. While campaigns come and go, Progress Texas is the permanent home for progressive media and action in the Lone Star State. The months leading up to an election are often the most difficult time for nonprofits like ours to raise money, as donors naturally are focusing on the campaigns we've all been talking about. We're in the peak of dry summer giving and need patrons of Progress to support the real free press as we amplify affordability, public education, and safe communities. Folks are raising $60,000 to get to election day and could use your help. So please invest today at progresstexas.org/donate. For the price of 2 Mexican margaritas at El Arroyo, you can be a patron or a patron of Progress. Please consider making that monthly. Find our Texas Union-made web store and merch at progresstexas.org. Thanks for listening, y'all, and please share this episode with a friend. Bye.
Bye, y'all.
Thank you.
Could everybody stay seated for 1 second and let Chris Mosier take a photo?